All right. So, hi, everyone. I want to thank you all very much for joining us here today. My name is Saranya Yogaraja, and I'm here on behalf of the Toronto Risk Management Association. So, in celebration of Women's History Month, the RMA is hosting a series of interviews with women in the industry, getting to know them both professionally and personally to help us all understand what made them the women they are today. And here with me today is Kelly MacDonald, Senior Vice President at Aon, specializing in risk and insurance services. Kelly, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's kick this off. So as part of Women's History Month, it's really important to bring awareness to the fact that there's very limited representation of women in senior leadership roles. I'm sure you are very familiar with that.
I am.
In your opinion, particularly being a senior VP yourself, why do you think it's important to have women in leadership positions?
So I think the biggest thing is it's perspective. All the studies will tell us that the more perspective your organization has, the more perspective or different viewpoints, experiences, the richer the outcomes are going to be. And I'll get some of the stats wrong, but I know tons of the consulting houses have done reports and research on what having gender equality, sort of at that C-suite level and senior representation does to earnings. So earnings go up, right? Companies do better. So, I mean, the stats are there, but again, just having that different, the depth and breadth of experiences by having, again, gender representation, equal gender representation, but also, I want to, obviously this is Women's History, we want to talk about that, but we also want to have, people from all walks of life, right? So really having that very rich, sort of group of senior executives is going to be very positive for an organization.
That's great. I find it interesting that, you hear about imposter syndrome and women really definitely face imposter syndrome. They don't think that they deserve to be there, which is so not the case. They just really need to change that mindset and let them know that they're just as capable of being at the table as anyone else.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Imposter syndrome is a big one, and you don't hear of men facing it. It's not to say that there isn't, a man here or there that feels that way, but that is largely seems to be a female phenomenon. And I'd love to tell you that I've never felt it myself, but I have probably earlier days in my careers, and I sort of had to sort of, slap myself on the face and say, stop being so silly, and sometimes, the way you do that is to, you keep a personal brag book, right? Mm-hmm. So, and really what I mean by that is just always be very mindful of what your accomplishments. What are your professional accomplishments? What are your personal accomplishments? What are some of the other things that you do to give back to the community or to, sort of to drive things that are really important to you, and maybe reflect that. And that's a good thing to do, if you're going into a review or if you're going into a job interview, maybe you're moving to another company or looking to get into that next role at your organization, go through your brag book, right? And that's going to remind you of why that imposter syndrome really should not apply. Yeah. And that it's going to fire you up for those conversations that will hopefully get you into that next role.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to just take a step back and just get to know a little bit more about how you became who you are. Is there any women in history that you always looked up to, that you really used to be a driving force in who you became today?
Sure. It's funny you asked that question. It took me a while to think about it. So I think about a lot of the women that, impact me today. My boss right now is a woman. She's spectacular. She's strong, she's smart, but she's sensitive and she really cares. So I absolutely look up to her. Obviously other women that I've worked with, within Aon, women in my industry. There's some female CEOs that have just done, really tremendous things within their own careers, within their, within their own organizations. But if I really had to think back to, who that woman in history was that really made me the person I am today, it's my mother. She's in the same industry as me. She's a force. We are similar and very different at the same time. So, sort of that 100,000-foot, lot of similar characteristics. Where we've taken our careers is slightly different, but within the same industry. But, she was somebody who has always had a huge amount of grit and tenacity. She fought her way up through the ranks, a lot, earlier than I did, so she had to go through this, in the 70s and in the 80s, fighting for those senior leadership positions. So just, listening to how she approached, some of the challenges, seeing how she, really always advocated for herself, and really how she charted sort of her own course within the industry, and has had a phenomenal career. I think, absent having her in my life and just watching her and watching her career evolve, I probably wouldn't be sort of where I am today. And we, obviously I don't do any formal mentoring with my mother, and certainly we're at points in our career where we're both, very self-sufficient on our own. But again, the more I reflect back, I mean, that is the person who I probably modeled myself after more than anyone.
This was an amazing conversation.
Oh, no,
very
thank
motivating.
you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was just great for me as well.
For sure.